Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We do not own the rights to this music. It is one of my favorite artists, Lucky Dube. It's entitled Together as One. How appropriate. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. How are we doing?
Hey, Cece, it's Riva from Northern Virginia.
Hi, Reva, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I am getting used to socializing from a distance. On a lot of my good time music.
That's excellent. This is the first time I put my Zoom video screen on, so we're all good.
Oh, really? Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm going with audio. It's easier. Nobody knows you're in your gym clothes.
That's true. That's true. Oh,
Definitely.
I see you and you look marvelous.
No, thank you. I haven't figured out the light. I'm looking at you and I'm learning. You have perfect lighting.
Yeah, I decided that when the light is behind the PC or the laptop, it works better.
Huh, interesting. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
when it's
try.
behind you, because you and I both wear glasses, and so we have that glare thing going on. And
Mhm.
so I try to put all the light behind me.
That's
Yeah,
better, right?
there you
That's
go.
better.
That's much
Okay.
better.
We are moving the screen. We are moving the screen.
Much
Okay.
better, much
Is
better.
is your colleague from Sierra Leone, is he joining?
Yeah, I just texted him to let him know that we're on.
Cool.
It's in the evening his time, so he's probably eating dinner.
No
um,
worries.
I'm sure he'll be on shortly, very shortly. But I do want to thank you for taking the opportunity to join us on the chat for the COVID-19 series. It's just so much going on, so much going on. And we've been having these discussions. And one of the things I realize is that we're not facing this crisis alone, right? It's a global pandemic. But one of the things that I am probably really excited about is that most of the areas where they have tremendous results and success is spearheaded by women.
That is true. I think Forbes made a front page magazine piece on that. You know, we're looking at New Zealand, Taiwan, where else? Finland,
Germany,
Germany, yeah,
New
and
York,
America.
and
Big
Maryland.
deal.
So in New York, you may see Governor Cuomo, but it's actually Melissa behind the scenes.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, you may see Governor Cuomo, but it's his wife behind the scenes and making it happen. So the women are really making it happen. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. I'm just waiting for the Honorable Cargo to get on the line. But I read an article that you wrote in The Hill, and I'm thinking, so she has the plan. You have the plan. Now we just have to get out to heads of state so they can follow your plan because you figured it out. And I think that it's going to take all of us to really come to the table, to really brainstorm and see how we can make this a global effort because we can't really isolate ourselves and do everything differently, right? It's a global pandemic. What kind of global goals can we utilize to just make this thing go away eventually, you know?
No, absolutely. Hey, Cece, thanks for referring to my article in The Hill. What I talked about was the capacity of Africans to be able to combat this disease because they've been fighting these type of viral infections since the 80s with AIDS, which tuberculosis, and then most recently with Ebola in 2014. So a lot of these countries have the ability to contact trace, to to test, to use social mobilization through the youth, which is one of the things you're talking about. And so what I was arguing for in my article is these countries have unique capacities and we should be helping them, even with the challenges we face here in mobilizing our own resources, because it's not only our obligation to our collective humanity. If we can't stop this infection in the global south, as Dr. Redfield said of the CDC yesterday, it's going to come back in the fall or the winter in a second wave. So it's not only in our collective interest of humanity, CC, which is what your program is all about, but also in our collective health interest. And the other point I would make too about women leading these successful efforts around the world is women have assumed a greater leadership on the health issues, particularly, CC, as you know, in Africa, that's usually the ministry that goes to women. You've
Right.
noticed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that says a lot about the importance of health to women in terms of a priority, and also their ability to incorporate that into social mobilization and the trust that a woman leader has in mobilizing its people.
Right. That's very good. We're gonna unpack that a little bit later as well, when we dive.
There's your colleague driving a
Yes. How
car.
are you? That's the Honorable Abdul Cardwell. How are you, sir? So, as you connect to audio, I know we all have to get on we're in different time zones. Good evening, sir. How are you? Okay.
Tell him he needs to unmute. There you go.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Yes, good evening. Sissy, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm great. I'm fantastic. Sorry for joining me late.
No, you're right on time, actually. I want to thank you for taking time out your busy day to join us.
It's okay.
The amazing Reva Livison that will be joining us with on this wonderful discussion. And I'm going to ask you before we get started very quickly, how's you and your family doing there?
We are fantastic. We are cool. We're doing fine.
Okay, wonderful. And how's the weather in Sierra Leone?
Well, today it's a little bit rainy. It's a little bit
Like
rainy.
the rainy season, right?
Yeah, we're just approaching the rainy season.
Oh, okay. Well, once again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us for the Silk Undress Licensed International Women's Media Forum. Today,
Okay.
we're continuing a high-level COVID-19 series on effective leadership during a crisis that we're facing right now. And today, we're going to focus on Africa's youth and sustained investment in human capital. Social distancing has taught us that technology is a business imperative. Now more than ever, the jewel of Africa, which are the youth, small business enterprises, artisans, farmers, and head of households, have had to develop tools to level up in a crisis like the one we're currently experiencing, starting with a transformational mindset to readjust, to readapt, retool, and I just want to give a little bit about myself. My name is Carlitha Cole, commonly known as CC Cole. I'm a serial entrepreneur, a licensed realtor, marketing, media, and communications professional. And I'm happy to announce that very soon I add financial planner to the list of things that I would like to do with my time here on Earth. Silk Undress International is a multi-digital platform interconnecting women globally with focus on personal and financial development. We're in our 13th year of curating content, experiences, and a global storyboard of women's bespoke success. And the Sustainable Development Goals 3, 4, 5, 6, and 16 to help end world poverty and to see if we can achieve gender equality by 2030. So once again, welcome everyone. I'm just gonna take out some of the background noise that we have here. Wonderful, wonderful. So according to Africa Arguments, there are currently 24,707 confirmed coronavirus virus cases in Africa. Over 6,000 have recovered, and they have confirmed over 1,199 deaths due to the virus. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund convened a delegation of African leaders, multilateral institutions, and bilateral partners to coordinate an immediate action on how to really craft a response for COVID-19 in Africa. Together, the group was able to procure up to $57 billion for Africa, including upwards of $18 billion from IMF and the World Bank each, to provide frontline health services, support the poor and vulnerable, and to keep the economies afloat in the face of one of the worst global economic downturns. Yesterday, I was happy to participate in the World Creativity and Innovation Day, which is an online youth-led initiative where youths around the world, particularly in Africa, the youth there put their brilliant minds to use to utilize technology to try to create very innovative and safe and healthy ways to help fight the COVID virus in their villages, particularly in areas where we know that water is scarce and sometimes people really can't even afford soap. So today we have really two amazing guest speakers that's going to really help us unpack all of this for us. And so once again, I want to thank you for joining us for the high-level COVID-19 series with the Honorable Abdul Kargbo on Africa's effective leadership during this crisis. Once again, we're really just going to focus on Africa's youth and sustained investment in human capital. The Honorable Abdul Kargbo is from the, I'm going to really mess up this pronunciation, so I really apologize in advance, the Lungi Polako district in the northern province of Sierra Leone. He's a telecom, electrical, and electronics engineer and IT supervisor. He went to the Foray Bay College and obtained a Bachelor in Engineering and IT/IL certificate at UK's Global Knowledge. Honorable Kargbo has been a very good advocate for the people of Sierra Leone. That is the reason why he was chosen and voted for by his people to become Member of Parliament for the constituency 077 in his home district in the northern region of Sierra Leone. Under the APC party, which is the All People's Congress Party. His contributions to the well of Parliament are great and pleasing to his constituents. He is somebody that has passion for youth. He was appointed chairman for the Youth Affairs Committee and also a member of Information and Communications Committee in the House of Parliament. Constituency 077 have faith and belief that the Honorable Kargbo is the best person to advocate for them in the House of in Parliament, particularly the youth and women who feel that he would have their major needs and issues and in his best interest. And I have to say to you, the Honorable Kargbo, one thing that I realize is that you are an absolute rock star in Sierra Leone. The youth absolutely love you. Opportunity to read about some of the things that you're doing, and I'm like, this guy rock, and you're so humble. And I just really like all the that you put forward and all the contributions that you made to the youth. It says something about your leadership style and that from the bottom up. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, and so I just have the first two questions. I just want to really dive right in. The first two questions are for you, and it's going to be followed by a presentation. After we have an opportunity to speak to both you and Rita, then we'll go ahead and have you do a presentation that I believe you have prepared for us. Like most of the world, Africa is grappling with multiple hits to its economic infrastructure, from anywhere from the disruption in production to stricter financial conditions and sharp declines in commodity prices. The health and human cost of the crisis has put a tremendous pressure on the healthcare and food systems that are already fragile there in Africa. What are some of the things that you're doing in Sierra Leone in terms of containment at the parliament level and initiatives by President Bayo?
Yes, of course. We are a very poor country, Sierra Leone, and we are situated in in West Africa. And the youth of Sierra Leone in fact, the population constitutes 60% of youth. So meaning the youth are the most populated in Sierra Leone. And of course, you know that we have had difficulties in sustaining businesses here, and a lot of business have shut down just because of the economic situation. Even prior to the coronavirus, we've had problems with our economy here. You know, things are just going up, skyrocketing. Prices of commodities are just shooting up because we depend mostly on importation. You know, imported goods is what we feed on solely here. So when there is crisis, especially a global crisis, Sierra Leone suffers the most because we hardly provide what we eat or we produce what we eat. So it has been a problem. It has always been a challenge for us as a country, as a nation. So when we had this coronavirus, it's a big challenge because as far as now is concerned, you know, governments have found it difficult, very difficult to even pay salaries, you know, and this coronavirus has gone to the extent that government also has found it very, very difficult to be able to trace cases, you know, those who have been contacted, those who have had interactions with affected persons, to the extent that was it the day before yesterday, the President Bio made a national address, and in his national address, he stated that he is going on self-isolation for 14 days because one of his securities have been confirmed of coronavirus. So he is going on isolation, self-isolation for the period of 14 days. So again, one has to ask the question that State House has had a case, and a lot of people have interacted with His Excellency the President, you see. But the President, in his wisdom, has just said he's going on isolation, you know, 14 days isolation. So to us, is alarming because we don't have enough test kits here. And most people are not tested, so you would not know who has the virus, who hasn't the virus. So to us, those who have been tested, most of them have proven positive and confirmed this. And today we had one death. It will be announced formally. This is the first death we've had since the beginning of the coronavirus. And as a nation, we are grappling with this virus because, you know, we are a poor country and we don't have enough infrastructure. We don't have the facility. We don't have the opportunities. We don't have what it takes to fight against the coronavirus. Recently, as recent as yesterday, bonuses were given to medical doctors, to the nurses who are taking care of affected persons. Bonuses were given to them because they wrote government and they gave an ultimatum that they were going to stop their work if government doesn't see to them or if government doesn't increase their salary. So as I'm talking now, today we have about 61 cases today, 61 confirmed cases. Today there is 11 new cases, and we have 6 that have recovered from the virus. 6 have recovered from the virus. So 11 new cases, 6 have recovered from the virus, and total confirmed cases is 61. And we have 608 people in quarantine. Those whom we've thought have interacted with affected persons, those who have gone close to affected persons, those who we think have gone to places that have gotten affected cases, confirmed cases, they are all quarantined. So as a nation, we have 608 people who are in quarantine. So Sierra Leone as a nation is in a very critical condition. If this continues, I begin to question how the economy of our nation would look like. As I am talking, a lot of the youth are jobless. A lot of the youth haven't got what to do. And that is the threat the nation was facing prior to this coronavirus scourge. You know, because a nation that cannot cater for its youthful population has the tendency to be prone to violence, have the tendency to be prone to a lot of violence incidences, because these are the youth the political parties use, when it comes to elections or when it comes to interpolitical party violence. These are the youth they use. They say the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So if our youth are not well taken care of, I am afraid that we will have a lot of problems, and now this has worsened the entire scenario. The coronavirus, a lot of institutions have shut down, a lot of places have closed. In fact, as I am speaking, there is inter-district shutdown, inter-district restriction. If you are in Botloko district, you would not go to Cambia district. If you are in Cambia district, you would not go to Botloko district. And people have found it very difficult to be able to do their inter-district business. And for the absence of that business, of those business, it has created a lot of problems for us in this nation. In fact, just because of the inter-district shutdown, there are a lot of goods that have gone up, their prices have escalated just within this short period of time. So as a nation, Sierra Leone, we are under very difficult circumstances. We are under very difficult moments, to the extent that our youth, as I have said, they are jobless, they need help. Our youth are not catered for, and we've gotten also this coronavirus to grapple with. And as I said, if we had had a lot of test equipment and a lot of people are subjected to test, then we'll have more cases. I'm sure we'll have more cases, because the level of interaction here in our country is incredible. It's incredible. And the scourge has eaten, into the fabrics of our country, and a lot of people in this country are parading with the coronavirus without them knowing, because we don't have a lot of test kits. People are afraid now to go to hospitals, because most of the hospitals now are serving as treatment centers or quarantine homes. So those who are sick would say, no, I would not go to the hospital. If I get sick at home, die at home. In fact, in my constituency, 2 people died recently because they were sick with malaria and could not go to the hospital because of fear that in the hospital there are confirmed cases, and if they go there, they will contract the virus. They did not go there and they died at home just because of lack of medical attention. So as a nation, it's alarming. We are afraid. We are afraid because we don't have the economy that can fight against this coronavirus.
Well, and I'm going to bring in Riva Livingston. She had wrote a really great article about that and offered a three-pronged plan and approach for, I say, heads of states. I think they should incorporate into their playbook. But give us one moment. We're going to come right back to you. Have some questions that you ask, that you mentioned about some of the youth and the restlessness and the violence. But before I go there, I want to get Riva's input on some of the things that you said, and to really talk about her three-pronged plan. Riva Livingston is an award-winning author, contributor to The Hill, president and CEO of KRL International, which she founded in 2007. Riva is a sought-after strategist, solving challenges for clients across the U.S. government, bureaucracy, and across continents. Riva got her start as an international consultant in the turbulent 1980s, and as an international operative at Washington's first bipartisan lobbying firm, Black Manafort, Stone and Kelly. Riva traveled to some of the world's most dangerous places at pivotal moments in history, including South Africa at the end of apartheid and Iraq immediately after the fall of Saddam Hussein. Though Riva has traveled to over 50 countries throughout her career, she is most passionate about Africa, where she advised former president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Africa's first democratically elected female president from 1997 through her 2 terms in office, and Council Joyce Vienna, former president of Malawi, during her period of exile. Reva writes a regular column once again in The Hill and is the author of the award-winning memoir, Choosing the Hero, My Improbable Journey and the Rise of Africa's First Woman President. Reva, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, how are you?
Sorry.
Good
Sorry, I didn't realize that. Thank you for that introduction. I wanted to say hello to the honorable congressperson from Sierra Leone. I'm waving to you. Can you see me? There we go. Excellent. I just wanted to remark, honorable, on what you said, because I was in Liberia and Ghana. I was there the first 2.5 weeks of the 2.5 weeks of March. And the article that I wrote was after my own discovery of how unprepared the health systems were in the Ebola affected countries to deal with COVID-19. And so I went on a bit of a scavenger hunt, honorable, in Liberia to understand how many ventilators there were in the country. Even though that's not a critical measurement, it's a critical barometer given what's happening in the US. And when I was there, I counted 3, and CC, not one of them was in the public health system.
Wow.
And so what I put together was almost a call to action. That was the article. And unfortunately, we have not beat the virus in Africa. I was trying to argue how critical it was to get ahead of the virus in Africa, because the weak healthcare systems could not withstand the infection. And I think the member of parliament has said exactly that. People are afraid to go to hospital because they don't want to be infected. And so that's pretty much what my article was about. What I suggested to the world, and I suggested to anybody who would listen, is that Africa has the capacity to fight the virus. We talked about this earlier, CC. We dealt with HIVs, tuberculosis, and as the Honorable knows, the deadly Ebola outbreak in 2014. So the institutional knowledge, the capacity, the civil society participation is there, but the resources were lacking. And so I was arguing for a mass mobilization of resources to Africa, which has been problematic because every country in the world needs oxygenators, they need PPEs, they need test kits, etc. But I argued aggressively that Africa needed them more because of the weakness of the healthcare system. And then I talked about the importance of the economic crisis and how there's no liquidity in the market. Many of these countries are coming from difficult economic circumstances. The Ebola hit countries from Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia still have not recovered from the collapse of the economies and the collapse of the commodity prices in 2014. And so there's a particular need, CC and Honorable, for that type of support. So I am with you, CC, and with Honorable Member of Parliament about what we need to do. The question is, how can we motivate that mobilization? And also, what can governments do right now, which is where the youth come in, to make sure that what they're doing, that people are responding, that there is trust in government, that there is trust in the authorities that are delivering that message, and that governments and communities can do all they can for people like us who advocate for Africa, CC, on the outside, to be able to support countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, and all of West Africa and the continent. Thank you very much.
Now, in this article, you did a comparative analysis, contrasting the capacity that the New York, you talked about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo that he's appealing for 30,000 ventilators to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. And you contrast that with Liberia, with a country of 5 million people, and there's just 3 ventilators. And so how do we compare that, and how do we deal with those equally and individually?
No, that's it was one of my most popular articles, CC, just because I guess it was the accident of time that I was there just before the first case was verified in Liberia, and then just before everything rolled. And what I argued, and Sierra Leone gets a lot of credit for that, Liberia closed its borders and declared an emergency with 3 cases confirmed. Sierra Leone did that with no cases confirmed, understanding the possibility of community spread. But
Extremely
what I guess,
proactive.
yeah, and I give a lot of credit to government and to the people of Sierra Leone, and also what we had heard from the private sector, because we have a platform, CC, across the private sector for mobilization in West Africa, is that how impressive Sierra Leone's outreach was, whether it's government or civil society, or the ability of a country that was so scarred from Ebola to know what to do. But again, as the Honorable points out, without resources, there's little that one can do. But I go back, and I think ventilators is a good way of focusing people's attention on just the gross inequities of 30,000 ventilators for a single city, which is needed. New York's had a crisis and is just now trying to stabilize with no single ventilators within the healthcare system. But the truth, though, is that ventilators are really not the critical commodity right now to help Africa. What's more critical, and you listen to this in speaking to people at JFK Hospital and other hospitals across the West Africa region, is they need medical oxygen, they need PPEs, they need Tylenol for fevers, the ability to hydrate when people are unable to take in any liquids or food. And so really, and even as basic, if you read Ruth McLean's article in the New York Times this past weekend, basic hygiene, the access to water and to soap. And so the ventilators, they're a great piece of $40,000 machine that need to be attached to electricity was scarce in Africa, that need to be attached to people who know how to intubate a person. And all of that is maybe focusing on a handful of people to help. What you really need are those interventions that can help a broad base of society in Africa. And I think that's what people are focusing on now. Over to you, please.
Okay, wonderful. And so when one of the things that we talked about early on, and the member of parliament will be able to talk a little bit more about this, is about the investment in human capital. In Africa, we know that their future is very bright if they can only invest in the youth and in their, they have this organic and innate ability to just be so brilliant. I mean, if they just had the proper tools in their hands, the right technology to help build mechanisms to actually help combat the virus in the local villages, and particularly in rural areas. What can members of parliaments and heads of states do to actually hone in on the youth's talent, and to the member's point where the youth are getting idle, and right now they have fears of violence breaking out. What can they do to engage them?
That's kind of CC, that's like a short-term, medium-term, and long-term challenge. But in the short term, I think that the youth are probably the most effective constituency to be mobilized as part of the response. And we do know that there's an increasing amount of money coming into Africa. It's not coming in terms of goods and services and supplies, usually like a USAID, CC, or a DFID, or the other institutions. They bring in their people, they bring in their goods, but we can't do that now because the supply chains are so choked. So there is additional liquidity going into places like Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso. And that liquidity can be used to bring the youth as part of the mobilization. And rather than have them be frustrated and have them be, not part of the solution, they can be brought in as contact tracers. They can be brought in as social mobilizers. They can use their voice on radio. And what we found, and again, I'm sorry we lost our honorable member of parliament, and I know he's a youth, he would have talked about this, but the turning point in the Ebola response, CC, in addition to the critical link, which was international mobilization, was the fact that the communities themselves understood their own responsibilities and they partook in the ability to self-police and to protect themselves. And so if you ask me what the youth could do, I think they should be mobilized and they should be part of the response. They're also the least likely to be severely affected. As you know, by COVID-19, it is not considered a devastating illness for the young, so they are less protected. There's another thing I would say as well, and I apologize for the back and forth. I can't turn that off on my email, but there's a gentleman named Dr. Raj Punjabi who runs Last Mile Health and has been at the forefront of the importance of community health workers being deployed across the country in all of the communities, particularly rural, to be able to trace and, it's test, trace, treatment, isolate. And they have mobilized now in Liberia 4,000 community health workers, CC, and many of them are youth. And you can train and you can employ, and then they feel a greater sense of society, of participation in society, to their government and to their democratic institutions. So I think that's what we should be doing. And then to your powerful point, the other thing that we saw again in Liberia, particularly because of then the leadership of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is the ability of women, the market women, and even even the younger females in schools and the technology savvy to participate as well. And we found that the youth and the women had a particularly strong resonance with civil society, with society in itself, and people were responding to the type of social distancing. At that time, Ebola was very different, as you know, but the ability to protect themselves, their families, and their communities.
That is wonderful, and I know that Africa is going to figure it out because Africa has been there, like you mentioned previously. They've been there with the Ebola. They've had really great successes in terms of their approach to fighting the Ebola. And not only that, I just think that their sense of togetherness, I think, also provides a great starting point because they've already been through this. I mean, they've been through the malaria, they've been through so much. And so they have the resiliency, I believe, to really tackle the COVID virus and try to combat it, provided they have the tools and the resources, the testing. Right now, the numbers are not accurate because there's no testing. So the more they do testing, of course, we know the numbers are going to fluctuate. And then, like you say, doing check-ins with individuals and making sure that those who are showing symptoms are getting the proper care that they can get. So I believe that Africa is in a great position with all the global partners that they have, to fight this thing. We're all in it together.
Yeah, I mean, Cece, what I would say is I think there's leadership in most places. There's governance, there's civil society, there's media, and Africa can do its part. But as we've seen here in the US, in the most sophisticated of societies, no matter how good your healthcare workers are, if you don't have resources, PPEs, and things like that, you cannot succeed. In Liberia right now, 28% of those infected with COVID-19 are healthcare workers. And
Wow.
so it is I think that Africa has a particular capacity, but at this stage, it cannot succeed without the global mobilization of resources, both for the immediate healthcare crisis and for the economic recovery. And I think there's a recognition of that, whether there's the global political will with the G7, with the G20, with the World Bank, with the IMF, that remains to be seen. And I think that is the responsibility of folks like us and CC like you, who have this type of platform to talk about our collective responsibility. I think that right now, you read again, I go back to these articles about ventilators, but the New York Times front page story on Sunday talked about a minister from an African country who couldn't get the resources to his country because every time he put in a bid, he got outbid. So you have a post-conflict fragile state bidding for scarce resources with 23 distributors out of China for medical supplies. And then they're subject to scant donations, and there just needs to be a prioritization in terms of what needs to go to Africa. I think we're beginning to see that. I think when the curve stabilizes in the US generosity will return to what it does best, which is help others overseas. We're even seeing now that the White House is looking at taking those excess generators and ventilators and moving them to Africa. So let's hope that we stabilize quickly and are able to move even quicker to be able to take what resources we can and help other people.
I applaud you. You're a lot more optimistic than I am in terms of the responsibility of this U.S. government. I'm, and that opens up another whole can of worms. But one of the things I want to point out is the lack of responsibility and preparedness the U.S. Is demonstrating right now, and the lack of leadership and decisiveness and cohesiveness when it comes down to a plan in terms of what they're going to do in this country. And I find too often that we look across the borders and across the seas to try to help other emerging countries and markets develop good governance, where we really have to start looking inside the US from the top to make sure that we can lead effectively. And this is
CC trying not to be political.
And I do apologize. I'm really trying hard.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think that, I think this disease, for the most part, took every developed country flat-footed, except for those that were in the sub-region and had, in the Asia area and had some ability to respond. So, that's the challenge. But I'm going to veer away from US politics, and I am in a state where the disease vector continues to climb, as are you. You're in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. But what I would say is that there's always been, CC, strong bipartisan support for global health, for PEPFAR, which is the Presidential Initiative Against HIV/AIDS, and for Africa. And even though these foreign assistance bills that have moved so far have almost been exclusively focused on our domestic response and our domestic challenges of unemployment, I have reason to believe that soon as we escape this immediacy, that there will be additional support that will be provided to Africa, whether it's leadership and whether it's the scope that we did in 2014 and sending the 101st Airborne to Liberia to fight Ebola. Don't think so. But if it can be contributed with the EU, some of the Asian countries that can, and others, it will make a difference. But it can't be transactional. Like, it can't be China coming in and decide who gets what. It has to be a global prioritization based upon needs. We're just not there yet.
And that's a segue into one of my final questions, and that is, with the back and forth with Africa and China, how can they rely on China right now to actually be a partner to help them with this pandemic?
Whew, big question, huh? Particularly when the US has frozen the support to the WHO because of early detection. You know, I think that Africa is going to go into this time with their eyes wide open with what that long-term relationship with China means, whether it's the unwillingness to mobilize and protect the continent from a virus that originated in the country itself, or the willingness to move healthcare resources on a donation base versus a transactional base. I mean, right now, the healthcare equipment is almost entirely centralized in China. And other than some donations, CC, most of it is just a cash machine, you know, where people are competing for what China is producing. And every time a donation goes, it's a major public relations effort. And I get that. And China has a critical role, but it also now, Africans have to scrutinize what role China is going to play in their long-term strategic decision-making, whether as an investor, a lender of debt, or even a strategic partner. China's trying to press its model of governance on the continent. So I think a lot of people, a lot of countries are going to be reassessing that. But I do agree with the head of the WHO and everybody else who wants to fight this pandemic now is not the time to reevaluate. We will have time. Now is the time for everybody who's got something to throw at it, you know, to be able to get through this virus. And we leave the China global big power play for the big thinkers in the next chapter, you know?
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. I would like to thank the Honorable Abdul Karbo and Ms. Riva Livison for joining us today on the Silk Undress podcast experience, where we're talking about COVID-19 from a high level perspective in terms of Africa's youth and sustainable investment in human capital. So I want to once again thank you for joining us. Please stay tuned to Silk Undress. Once again, we have released our 25 Influential Women of 2020 list. It's absolutely amazing. You will begin to see their profiles go up. Stay in tune with us. Next talk show would be on Friday at 7 p.m., where we would begin to speak to different ministers and pastors throughout the U.S. in terms of how they're leveling up and continue to keep their congregants engaged online and what they're doing in the community. We're just going to talk and make sure everyone is well through this crisis. And so, Riva, once again, I just want to thank you for joining us on the Silk Undress.
My great pleasure, Cece. I want to thank you for all that you do, the platform that you provide. And it's always a pleasure to join you, you know, in better circumstances the next time, right?
Right. Well, thank you so very much. Be safe at home, be well, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, Riva.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.